And thank you, Jane. This does feel like a bit of a significant moment at Landcare Victoria. So it is a privilege to be able to step in as the acting CEO to support the conversation tonight. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands I'm beaming in from, the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Kulin Nations, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Just in terms of a bit of housekeeping, if you can pop yourself on mute, please do feel free to put any comments in the chat. We will have a chance for a bit of a conversation and back and forth tonight. And anything that we are unable to answer tonight, we do have the team available, and we've got our contact details at the end. So you can get in touch. So Sarah, if you'll run across to the overview. So tonight my job is really just to help articulate what it is that we're been cooking up at Landcare Victoria and to ask for your help. We will be launching the Landcare plan, so we'll talk a little bit about that. I guess start to unpack how together we can work on getting Landcare first and foremost in the forefront of people's minds in the next 12 to 18 months. So we've got some key messages that we have been working on with the support of some consultants. And those key messages are about Landcare's facilitators and regional coordinators being critical to Victoria's response to biodiversity loss and climate change. We really are working to leverage the release of the 10-year plan, which is the Victorian Landcare Plan. And that is because it is pretty unique. It's something pretty special for Victoria to have pulled together and really does start to carry forward that shared agenda from the Landcare community. And we're wanting to really highlight now the need for Landcare to have some funding certainty. So the Victorian Landcare Plan we're going to be launching on Monday at 11 a.m. and really hope that you can join us. It is a plan that outlines the collective goals and priorities of the Landcare community and highlights key actions and areas where support is needed to deliver on that vision. So it's as much a call for action with our stakeholders and supporters as it is a document that helps us as the peak body support our membership, you and the groups and networks across the state to do the work that we do. So the plan was developed in consultation with our membership alongside the key voices of our key partners and stakeholders over a 16-month period in 2022 and 23. I'm sure the fact that you turned up here tonight means that you probably came to one of those many engagement opportunities that we offered and or put your feedback into the surveys that we put out to the Landcare community to capture their voices, thoughts and feedback as we move forward. So we really did hear the passionate, dedicated, independent voices of the Landcare community, and this plan is providing insight of value that Landcare offers Victoria and contributes to the understanding of what's important to us as a movement moving forward. It's really important to understand this isn't a plan that's Landcare Victoria Inc.'s plan. It's not our strategic direction, but it absolutely will frame the strategic priorities of our organisation in supporting the movement. So the launch on Monday is really quite significant to us, and we've got the support of some of our key stakeholders on the day. We really hope that you can help spread the word and get as many Landcarers there to be part of that process. So we're using that story about the Landcare plan to help start to get some media interest and traction and to talk about some of the needs around funding that we have. We're also hoping that you can help us help the Landcare movement. And the ask is that you can help us to get the word out. And we'll talk more about this as we go forward with the rest of the webinar. And some of those activities might be to hold a meeting with your local MP, to write a letter to your MP or to the editor, or to support Landcare on social media. We've got a communications toolkit that we've drafted with great templates and examples that will help support some of the activities that we're talking about tonight. And then we've got today's webinar where there's a chance to hear from some experts around how we do this stuff and to ask questions and give feedback about this process moving forward. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Les. And I've heard only wonderful things about Les and have to say it's been a joy working with you over the last couple of weeks. So Les, over to you.
Thanks so much, mate. Nice to see everyone. Thanks for turning up. It's really important. Really care about land care and farm biodiversity. So just want to share my screen for a bit. I should introduce myself though. So my name's Les White. I grew up in the Latrobe Valley and I did 4 years on the Fairfax papers down there. And after that, I did 5 years at the Weekly Times. I was their federal politics and national affairs writer from 2009 through to the end of 2012 in Canberra, in the Canberra Press Gallery. And I ran the Deputy Premier's media team for 2 years after that in Victoria. And then I ran the media team for a lady called Fiona Nash, so Minister for Regional Development, Regional Communications, and a few other things. I was her Deputy Chief of Staff for 3 years. And then I ran the media for the Agriculture Minister for 2 years. I was his Deputy Chief of Staff as well, and I've been consulting in this space since then, since about 2019. So I'm just going to share my screen. So I'll just run through a few quick media tips for when you're talking to the media. And after that, I will talk briefly about how you go when you're meeting MPs, MP meetings and stuff like that. So, oh, hello. Just want to share my screen. Basic, that'll be fine. Okay, so can you guys all see that middle ground and conservative messaging? Yeah, fantastic. So this is a presentation I do several like it, but I just put this one together for you guys. So when we're talking particularly about issues to do with environment and climate to middle ground audiences and conservative audiences, which obviously country audiences tend to be, we try to talk in language and in framing that makes them comfortable or leaves them comfortable. And framing is really important because you can look at one issue from several different angles, and that's how people see the world. They have their own lens on the world and they see everything differently. They interpret data and events differently and stimulus differently. So just to start with, whenever you're talking to media, really good to remember that simple language is what cuts through, not fancy language, and definitely not big words. Big words tend to alienate people. When people hear you say a word that they don't quite understand, they actually generally get a bit annoyed at you and they think that you think you're a bit smarter than they are. That annoys them. So just an example from that 2016 American campaign. It's just a good one. We don't do these kind of studies in Australia, but in America, they've got a lot more money. So Bernie Sanders, the Democrat candidate that ran against Hillary Clinton for their Democrat nomination, used 18,000 words during that campaign. That's a pretty big vocab for most people. Hillary Clinton, 16,000, still pretty big vocab for most people. Trump, 800 words, 800. So that's why that guy communicated better than the others. He used language that everybody could understand, not just that the top 15 or 20 or 30% could understand. So just moving on, this one's just about the importance of just sticking to your 3 key messages and trying to repeat them, because it's repetition that gets your message through. It's not whether it's wrong or right. It's certainly not whether it's true or false. It's how much you repeat it. And so this is just a study that was done on the Voice campaign. This was printed in the Fairfax papers, I think the day after the referendum, actually. I think it was on the Sunday, story by James Massola. But you see here that the Yes campaign had 33 different messages running. You couldn't call them key messages because that's 11 times too many messages. Also, I usually now ask people if they can name the key spokespeople for the Yes campaign, and most people can't do that. But most people, if I ask you what was the key message of the No campaign, most people can name it. They know that it was if you don't know, vote no. And they can usually name the 2 key spokespeople as well, Jacinta Price and Warren Mundine. So that's just discipline in the messaging. And I just want to show you how the polling went. So that goes right back to July 2022 when voice support was at 66, 2/3 of the population. And as that campaign wore on, I'm not saying that lack of message discipline was the only reason, by the way, but it certainly didn't help. And so you see that drop all the way down to 39 on referendum day. And that after the campaign really starts and those campaign messages really kick in, which I think is about here, it really is a steep drop. So discipline and short messages, short key messages that people can understand really do matter. So I usually use a cheat sheet. This is just one that I mocked up before for you guys, but so you can have that in front of you if you're doing a radio interview, or even if you're doing an interview for the television on Zoom, because a lot of these TV interviews now are on Zoom, and you can just look at your computer and have that stuck either on your screen or next to your screen or something. And so you've got those messages in your head. When most people talk to media, they get a bit nervous, and the nervousness is actually cortisol in your brain, and cortisol's job is to stop you from thinking. It's to put you into fight or flight. It's to It's to get you physically ready to run or fight. And so there's not much, and so it stops your brain from thinking, it slows you down, and that's why people get a brain freeze. So if you have this in front of you, it can be useful. So you can see how short I keep my messages there, because you want them nice and simple. You want people to understand them. So, we've released our 10-year plan, but the work we do is at risk. We need funding certainty. So the art form is often trying to get it down into that really simple form. If you want to extend that last one, it would, well, I think someone just needs to go on mute. Might be you, Michael. We need funding certainty could be we need funding certainty to keep good staff, or we need funding certainty to keep our coordinators, or something like that. I usually have a useful fact or stat there, because you can easily say that on the radio or the television, and when you're repeating facts and stats, you sound pretty smart. People remember it. If you're repeating numbers out of your head, people think you sound quite clever, so that's worth doing. So 80 regional land care facilities, 10 coordinators across Victoria, and they're harnessing the power of thousands of volunteers from 600 Victorian land care groups. That's a pretty powerful little message in itself. Really, the idea of harnessing community power really does appeal to Labor governments, and so that's why I chose that one. And a pivot is when a journalist asks you a question about something that you don't actually want to talk about. It's not one of your key messages, so you just address their question. So you respect the question and you answer the question, and then you just pivot. So I usually use the word and you pivot back to your message, or you can repeat a word that you've said in the first part of your answer is an easy way to do it. So what color is the sky? The sky is blue, and that's important for a lot of people. What's important for farmers, climate and biodiversity is that Landcare gets the certainty of long-term funding. So you've addressed the question. In this instance, I use the word important in the first part, then I repeat the word important in order to go back to our topic, back to our key message. This one, I usually just do this to try to get people to understand that different people see the world through a different lens, so they'll interpret the same information in a different way. I always use this one because I'm not scared of snakes, and lots of people are. So if two of us are standing in the same field and a snake goes between us, the same distance from each of us, it's the same snake, I might think that's fantastic. I might try and get closer to it. I think the colours are great. And so I think that's great. I had a great experience. That was a really nice thing to happen. But someone who's scared of snakes will have a completely different experience out of that, even though they've had exactly the same stimulus that I have. They interpreted it differently. So they might interpret it as a scary thing. That was very, they might feel like they were at risk. They might get quite angry, because people who are scared then get angry. So people see things in a different way. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but I just want to show you, this is a massive study from America, 132,000 people. So that's 100 times bigger than an Australian news poll. And it just shows that's progressives on the left, conservatives on the right, and you can see that they value very different things. So the progressives really only value care and fairness, so compassion, fairness, equality, that kind of thing. Once we get across to the centre, people sort of value, or the just right of the centre, people sort of tend to value 5 things. So they value loyalty, authority, and sanctity. So in real life, that'll come out as things like nationalism or pride for Australia will be the loyalty one. Sanctity usually comes out as family values, loyalty to family. Authority, so progressive people just tend to, they don't need as much structure and they don't respect authority as much generally. Right-wing people are happier with the authority, usually a bit more happy with those military type structures, command type structures. Yeah, so people just value things differently. And so for instance, if you're talking to a very left-wing person about an issue like environment, you can say, well, we really do want to save the koala, and that'll get them because they'll feel compassion and care for the koala, and they won't think it's fair if the koala goes extinct. On the right, if you mention that, you'll get absolutely nowhere. You need to say that we're risking our tradition and our legacy of looking after the environment, or you need to connect with family, or a theme like that. In the climate change space, I usually go straight to renewable energy creates jobs, because that's a value that speaks to these people on the right, but it won't speak as much to the people on the left. Interestingly, when you speak to those sort of middle ground and conservative values for an organisation like Landcare, if we're talking about looking after the land, you will still take the left-wing people with you if you use that centre ground and centre right language, because they reward you for looking after the land. But if you talk about looking after the land by saying that we have a moral obligation to do that, you'll lose all these people on the right. You'll only get the left. And this is just an example of it. In the climate space, we've got very good polling on how Australians think about climate. And so this is, left to right, really. So that's Labor and Greens vote on the left there. People who are alarmed, and the alarmed language, and this applies to the environment and land care just as much as it does climate. When you use alarmed language, it annoys these people in the middle that are concerned or cautious about environment and climate. And so rather than saying we need to save the koala, which will get these people here, or you have a moral obligation to save the koala, which will only get these people on the left, we move up here. And if we're talking about climate change, for instance, I would normally say that we don't want the farmers that have worked so hard to build their businesses to lose that. So you're putting it into human terms rather than asking for people to be compassionate about nature, which not everyone unfortunately does. And so this is just an extension of that. You don't talk, this applies a lot when you're in media. Don't talk about the crisis framing, like if you don't act now, we will lose the koala, or, we will get floods and fires. It actually doesn't motivate most of the population. The moral obligation thing I just talked about, if you tell people they've got a moral obligation, not everybody believes that, or people will think that some will think that their moral obligation is here and now to their family and their job and their boss, their business. We always keep things simple, so we don't talk in complexity. And I always frame things positively, just because my personal experience is when you tell people you're going to ban something, they don't like it. So here in the ACT, where I live, in Canberra, the government here announced that they're going to ban wood fires. You won't be allowed to have a wood fire in your home. I think that was incredibly stupid framing, really, really, really bad. Telling people that they can't do something is a bad idea. But if they'd gone out and said, you know what, we will pay for you to get reverse cycle air conditioning, or we will pay for your new heater. In exchange, though, for paying for it, we need to swap you out for the wood fire. I think you will get people doing that because they see it as a gain and they're not being told what to do. They're being offered choice, and it's really important to offer people choice. They push back if you don't do that. And so this is just some of those middle ground values that you can talk to. So like I said earlier, we've got a tradition of looking after our country in this state, and that's something that we should be really proud of. So that's something that will motivate the middle ground. Anything to do with that nationalism or parochialism thing. So that could be, here at Landcare Victoria, we want to get that certainty of funding because we really want to look after Victoria. We don't want New South Wales beating us at how it looks after the environment or farms. So you invoke that parochialism, that tends to work. We could say that the environment is one of our natural strengths in Victoria, which absolutely it is. It's great for obviously farming relies on it. It's also great for the tourism industry. I think that's probably enough. I think you guys probably get the gist. And this is just about framing everything as a gain. So if you're talking to media about what we need, so you would frame investment in land care as definitely an investment. It's not a cost. It's not an expense. It's an investment, which is a positive frame. And if you invest in land care, you harness the power of all those volunteers across the country, which is really efficient because land care does so much with so little. So again, you're framing it as a big gain, and investment in land care is a big gain. And that's just some of that positive framing there. So, this was something I did for an electric vehicle mob. More electric vehicles in Australia give people more choice. They can choose, just wrecked that. They can choose different vehicles. Whereas, how did I manage that? Sorry, guys. Whereas if you're telling people that they must drive an electric vehicle and they can't drive their petrol vehicle anymore, they're going to hate you because you're taking choice off them. That's just about it on the media stuff. Did anyone want to jump in there with questions? I'll go to the MPs bit straight after this. No, I think we're okay. Okay, so I'll just shut off that screen sharing. Okay, so when you go to meet an MP, you usually set this up with a letter, and I usually like to open the letter with something positive. So it's usually thank you for something they've done. So even if you can just find something little, even if it doesn't mean that much to you, it's really nice to open with a thank you. It's really hard not to like somebody who says thank you when they first meet you. So I normally open with a letter saying, hi, I note you've been really interested in a space related to land care. So you'd pick farming or environment, land use, any of those things. Thank you for your interest in that. And thank you for this small thing that you did. If you jump on Google, you can almost always find something that some politician voted for that's good. Thank you for that. I'd really like to request a meeting because to discuss, Landcare's 10-year plan and its need for certainty of funding. So certainty is another middle ground and conservative theme. Certainty is really important. Landcare really does need certainty of funding to keep good staff and keep delivering as it does, keep delivering so much with so little, which is what it does. So yeah, open your letter with the thank you, talk about the topic, and I usually title the letter meeting request because you want to be clear that you're asking for a meeting. After that, you can actually, and I think, I think you guys are distributing a toolkit. I think each of you are receiving a toolkit, yeah. So that's actually got this in it already. After that, hopefully you do get a meeting and you can pop in there. There's a few rules. One is always be respectful to all people. I know I shouldn't have to say that, but it is worth saying because sometimes people don't. Also, the person who is making your tea or coffee is often very powerful and sometimes deceptively so. I've seen this a lot. So particularly the diary manager is super powerful. The receptionist is really powerful. And the person who gets sent to get your tea often is a junior advisor. And that person probably does all the grunt work and the legwork on what you're asking for. So it's always worth bearing that in mind. And in political offices, the titles are really misleading. So chiefs of staff often are the most powerful person in the office, but not always. And lots of chiefs of staff get kind of bogged down with a lot of paperwork. And so they're not actually in the day-to-day decision-making. So could be a misleading title. But like I said, that junior advisor could be doing all the legwork. They could be supplying all the information that the minister assumes is a fact. And so you really do want to win them over. You want to get your 3 key messages across in the first minute, and then you want to start repeating them. You want to highlight all the things that you've got in common with this person. So most people usually start with family or kids. That's an easy one that a lot of people have in common. Or any common interests that you've found that they have on, just have a look on the internet. It'll say on their biography what they say they're interested in. If you've got anything in common with that, you can reference that. You want to start off with the commonalities. So you want to show them really that you're their tribe. So politics is about tribal psychology and it's about us versus them. So you want to show them that you're either in their tribe or you're similar to them. You want to accentuate all similarities. Talk about your 3 key messages. Obviously answer all questions, but try to answer them briefly. So most of the time politicians will only give you a half-hour meeting. If you meet them in Parliament on a day that Parliament's sitting, I guarantee you'll be interrupted at least once because they'll have to go and vote on something. The bells will go off. They'll have to run out of the room. So most 30-minute meetings, I honestly reckon you get 12, 15 minutes of their attention. And that first 3 minutes really is key. So you really want to get those key messages out there after you've built your common ground. The other thing that I always do, which is based on some American research, is I don't raise the thing that I disagree with them on. You will disagree with every politician you ever meet on 100 different things, and there's no point arguing about it when you're trying to get more funding for Landcare because that's not the main game. You're just there to get that funding for Landcare. The other thing that I would normally do is you want to tell some personal stories. So if you're off a farm, you could tell a story about the difference that Landcare's made in your region or on your farm, and you want to name that. You want to name what it is. So if it's that you got to plant 2,000 trees, which you couldn't have done otherwise because you would have been too busy or you couldn't have afforded the seedlings, you want to say that. And then you want to say what you've seen. If those trees have grown a bit, you want to say what you've seen around there. So, and I've noticed the birds coming back, or I saw this honey eater. You want to name those things. So all language that you use, you want to be visual. You want the MP to be able to visualize it. And so I don't talk about big concepts at all. I give them small, specific examples that they can picture. And so that's why I suggest using the animals, particularly rare ones. Like there's some research that shows that lots of Australians sort of subconsciously gauge the health of the environment by using iconic animals, and only that. They don't have an understanding below that. So I often go to things like platypus or koalas, yellow-tailed black cockatoos, things that most people can picture, and that works. I think that's probably it for me. You do want to follow up. You do want to try and get some sort of teamwork dynamic going. So you can ask the MP. I usually just ask them, can I help you in some way on this? Like if you wanted to do something better, if you wanted to fund Landcare more, how could I support you to do that? Can I be useful? So that's sort of part of trying to become a bit of an advisor to them, or at least someone who helps them, and they see you as someone who is a positive thing. They're glad to see you walking in the door of their office. If they do ask you for anything, you want to follow up pretty quickly. I definitely wouldn't leave it more than a day. If you've had a morning meeting, you really do want to send something off in the afternoon, at least to say thank you for the meeting. I hear you asked me for X, Y, and Z. I can't deliver all 3 of those things today, but I'll send them to you in the next couple of days. You just want to let them know that you're on it and that you took it seriously. I think that's actually about it for me. If anyone has any questions, please hit me.
Thank you, Les. I know I've been writing notes furiously, and I just want to reassure everyone that we have put together a bit of a communications toolkit with some of these gems in it. So you don't have to have absorbed that all. I think Les lives and breathes this stuff, and every time I've listened to you, I think I could spend a lot longer there as well. I'm conscious we've actually got a bit of a case study, so I know it's a lot easier to try and imagine what this might look like as a Landcare member or a network member, if you can kind of hear from someone who's done it or doing it or learning on their way. So I do welcome questions, but I'm wondering if we just hear from Jenny Linden first, and then let's jump into a bit of a chat and ask Les all of the bits that we want to know. So Jenny is a passionate land carer from the Ghana Landcare Network up in the Yarra Ranges, and I'll let her tell her story. So over to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Claire. We went to see Daniela De Martino, who's the member for Monbulk, and she's a new politician filling the seat formerly held by James Merlino, who was the Deputy Premier and Minister for Education. James was a very popular politician, both in the Parliament and in his electorate, and so Daniela inherits a very positive division. She's aware of that. We visited James Merlino many years back, and he was polite and he was interested momentarily in the endangered emerald starbush, but he was clearly on another plane and he was going to forget about us as soon as we walked out. But Daniela's new, and we had time to build a relationship with her. So for the meeting, when you said letter, Les, I presume email, because we just emailed, and before I did that, I read her inaugural speech. Those inaugural speeches are fantastic. They give you so much information about your politician or your local member. Then I followed her on Facebook, and then I contacted her staff to organise the meeting. So it takes a while to get a meeting. Daniela currently spends more time in her electorate than most do, but it took us about 6 weeks. And it's also important, I reiterate with Les, to build a good relationship with the member staff, because they manage the office, the diary, and the advice. And the more important the politician is, the more power is invested in the advisor. So we were asked to provide agenda items. This gives the office a chance to seek advice from the bureaucrats if they need to. We wanted to introduce ourselves. We wanted to get a diary date for Daniela to launch the Nangana network. And we wanted to discuss the facilitator program as it affected us. So 3 of us went to the meeting. I don't recommend any more go, because the meeting rooms in electorate offices are quite small, and there's always an advisor, maybe 2 or a staff in the meeting. We took in some tube stock from the Yellingbo Indigenous nursery run by Friends of the Helmeted Honeyeater. Daniela loved the plants. It turns out she's a great gardener, and it was small enough not to infringe the rules around gifts, and it was a useful prop for a picture. And we asked her what her interests are. Clearly, this is not a question we would have asked James Merlino, but Daniela's starting out and we're building the relationship. So most people go in to ask for something. You can imagine what it's like for them to have you ask how you can help them. Some of the things that she's interested in do intersect with Landcare. We don't know how or when that will work for us. The environment, which she reiterated, that was clear from her inaugural speech anyway. Food security is really important to Daniela. She ran an organic grocery, and education, because she was a teacher. Now, Daniela is also on the Legislative Assembly for the Environment and Planning Committee. That committee can examine any matters connected with the Department of Energy and Climate Action and the Department of Transport and Planning and their related agencies. I don't know quite where those committees sit in the scheme of things. They make their own inquiries, or they can have a matter referred to them by the Legislative Assembly, but it's something to bear in mind. So Lorna, Daniela's assistant, took a picture at the end of the meeting, and just bear with me. This is I can't do the clever things that Les did with the things, but there's our picture of Daniela and our meeting with her plants and Mangana people. After the meeting, I wrote to thank Daniela and the office staff. I reiterated our list and confirmed her interests, and we put the photo on Facebook. We're also going to be sending her a picture of the Emerald Starbush with a loan agreement. Friends of the Helmet at Honeyeater had a painting on the wall of James Molino's office for many years. Offices are government property and gifts are not allowed, hence the loan agreement. Then I wrote a summary of the meeting for Landcare in anticipation of this campaign, and keeping in touch with local meetings will help Landcare build their database. So just to sum up, it's hard to get the attention of a politician. If they're established like James Molino, they have huge responsibilities and agendas. And if they're new like Daniela, they're everywhere, looking for a niche, looking to build their career. So I suspect it's important to make some noise, which is it's tricky to do in a noisy world. Politicians really care about media. I've just read Cathy McGowan's book, Cathy Goes to Canberra. Cathy was behind the Voices of India, as I'm sure everybody knows, and she made a fair bit of noise there. When she went to Canberra as an MP, she discovered you still have to make noise to get attention on issues, and she did it by getting those issues into the Border Mail, which would turn up in the relevant minister's press clippings. Social media is obviously more critical now, but I think for friendly, constructive, purposeful relationships, we're going to need persistence, patience, and perhaps a bit of polite noise.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Les, and thank you, Jenny. That was, I thought, a really wonderful and informative session, and I hope you all found it to be that way too. That's my second opportunity to listen to Les, and I must admit I refer to my cheat sheet that I made up the last time he gave a presentation often. It's really helpful just to have that structure when you're going off to visit an MP. And Jenny's case study was just perfect for what we're trying to achieve and to give a bit of guidance. So thank you guys very much. Now, I am not at all articulate, and so please don't leave it to me having to speak on the radio all the time, because I always screw up the messaging. So I really need you guys to get on the bandwagon and help out as much as you can. So don't be afraid. Talk to Claire or Sarah if you need a little bit of guidance. They'll give you some helpful hints, and yeah, just get out there and be brave. But thank you very much for attending.